Since we seem to be doing a lot of our classwork on the computer, and probably will be for a little while, I thought I'd give you a few tips on some tools for electronic perspective drawing. And these are leveraging tools which we have already covered this semester: Adobe Illustrator and Autodesk AutoCAD. So first, with Illustrator, there is a tool called the Perspective Grid tool. I'll just move my mouse over. And when you click on the tool, it puts in, you guessed it, a perspective grid in your project. And there are a couple of different kinds of grids. If you go to the window view pull-down menu under perspective grids, you'll see there's a 1-point perspective, and I'll just choose that one. And there's also a, we were just looking at a 2-point, there's also a 3-point perspective, which is great if you are creating some kind of bird's eye view. For us, we aren't going to be doing anything quite so fancy. Let's just go with a 1-point perspective for now. And to just give you the basic understanding here, with the perspective tool activated, first of all, there's a little widget up here on the upper right, which if you want to close the perspective grid, you just click the little X and away it goes. And you can call it back up again by clicking on another tool and then clicking on the perspective grid tool. It does help to understand a little bit about perspective. The first thing is this is the horizon line, and that is part of our perspective drawing. That is based on our eye height. You can click and drag these kind of little grabbers here to adjust the horizon line height, and you can also control the location of side planes. Again, we're just looking for a grid to help us draw stuff. You can also control how much of the ground you see. Again, if you look at some photos, you're going to find that you'll see more or less ground depending on where it is. Anyway, and then you can also control the height of the grid. Again, if we put in some kind of picture or something that we want to try and match, it really is helpful to have that grid. But the big joy of using this grid is that you can draw on any of these surfaces. If you click on this icons up here on the widget, you'll see that the surface matches the color of the face I click on. And any tool that you care to draw with will draw on that surface, and these objects will appear as if they're vanishing in in perspective. So here we go. I'll add in a little bit of color. And of course, all of your drawing tools are available. I'll click on the rectangle tool, click on the bottom face, and I could make this any sort of line type, brush, etc., etc. And you can pretty quickly generate a sense of a space. Now, do note that these objects are not connected to the perspective grid. So if I come in and I say move this perspective grid location to the other side of my drawing, the object stays in place, which is a little bit annoying. And in fact, if I were to copy this object, it copies it exactly, right? It does not, it does not adjust it based on the perspective distortion. But I could easily come in here and draw, and it will still draw on this grid, assuming that's the one that I have selected. And you can make it snap to that grid so that as you adjust things, they remain connected. But do be aware, again, as you draw your objects, they are not glued to that grid. So warping, distorting objects is definitely something you want to you want to be careful with, because your perspective will get off very quickly. And it's easiest in this case. I drew that, but it wasn't exactly matching the other side because I wasn't snapping to my grid. I'm just going to redraw it. That's the easiest thing. And of course, you can continue to adjust your perspective grid. It's handy to be able to, say, move your reference plane up or down. You just have to click the right grip here in order to adjust it. Whoops, that's not the right one. It's this one, I believe. No, that changes the spacing. It's this one, maybe. Yeah, there we go. So if I want to draw a cube shape or whatever box shape, I'd want to adjust this to get the right plane. And again, you can draw on any plane, so make sure you're drawing on the right plane. But you could pretty quickly create some different shapes quite easily. Most of the time, for most of you, these grids are going to be valuable for creating kind of a wireframe that you can hand render over. If you do become adept at adjusting the grid and drawing with it, by all means, you can draw entire drawings using Adobe Illustrator and these perspective grids. And I can even place in here one of my elevations from my project, and I can create what appears to be a one-point interior perspective just by dragging this object in here and positioning it correctly. Two-point perspective grids operate in the same way. You can adjust the horizon height. Again, if you want to draw some kind of object, you'll want to scale it so that it kind of fits your project. You can adjust the grid spacing, and you can also adjust the position of these perspective walls here. And as before, as long as you have set the drawing tools to snap to your grid, you can draw in any form. Again, it will not do things that are scaled, but it will absolutely create a simulacrum of perspective drawing. And as we did with the one point, you can adjust each piece of this and draw shapes on really any part of the grid, just so long as you get the correct floor or a correct face for the perspective drawing that you're intending. And when you're done with your drawing, whichever style you choose, make sure you click back on the perspective grid in order to edit the location of different elements. And as you adjust the grid, it will snap to your objects, sort of, or at least it typically does. And of course, you always want to have scale figures. I have grabbed one off of the internet, and you can place it here in your drawing. And it behaves like any other drawing in that you can control the size and the drawing order. And in fact, when you turn off the perspective grid, hopefully what you have left is just a drawing that is and you can see here, that's a pretty good simulation of a perspective drawing. And really, we just were drawing some very basic shapes. And of course, you can control how big the project seems by just changing the scale of our scale figure. That is the scale part of a scale figure. Here it's a building. And if I zoom out, it can become just, I don't know, an ottoman. So Adobe Illustrator, again, great for making these perspective grids that you can hand draw and hand render on top of. So what if you already have your floor plan created in AutoCAD? Why should I redraw my perspectives when I could probably just use the geometry in AutoCAD? And in fact, you can. And here is just a floor plan of this sandwich shop we've been working on. And one thing we really haven't talked about is this view cube up in the upper right here. What you'll see, it's a kind of box, and I'm going to just click and drag on the corner of it with my left mouse. And look at that. I'm in 3D. I can zoom in and out by scrolling. I can click and drag my scroll wheel to pan. But now I'm actually in 3D. It's kind of an axonometric. And in fact, if you click on any of these faces, it will show you that face in 3D. Now, of course, there is no 3D just yet. I could create 3D geometry using a number of tools. The simplest one is I could select everything on the, say, walls layer. And I'm just going to right-click on the screen and choose the Quick Select tool. I could also turn off all the layers, or I could and just have the walls active. But this is a pretty easy way to do it. If you just quick select and choose layer, it will allow you to pick the wall layer if that was your current layer. And I'm going to open up the properties menu and change a parameter called thickness. And I can make this, say, 10 feet. I'm just going to type that in and hit enter. And like magic, I now have a 3D model. I'm going to hold down Shift and click and drag my scroll wheel just so you can see what we're looking at. Now, it is a little hard to see. This is what's called a wireframe, where any 3D surface is just displayed by its outlines. I want to open up some 3D toolbars here. Those are usually hidden. To see them, just right-click on your blank area of your toolbar, and you can show these different tool tabs by just checking the box next to them. I just closed one of them. I can turn it back on, and you see how it appears here in the list. The visualize one is one that's really nice because we can tell AutoCAD to show us this instead of a wireframe. There are over here in visual styles, there are all sorts of different views, especially if we do end up using AutoCAD to show materials, which we don't usually do, but if you did, you could show those. Either way, I'm just going to go with shades of gray. And there you go. You have yourself a very nice kind of axonometric of your project. And you can also change the visual style here on the upper left of your kind of viewport here in model space. You can choose it. And if you have any named views, you can also choose those. But shades of gray, it's nice to be able to see what they look like. Now, the other thing you can do over here on the upper left is under the view controls, and you can find these up in the visualize toolbar as well. But we can choose perspective. And like magic, suddenly we have a vanishing point and the drawing is starting to look distorted as if it was in perspective. Depending on what kind of project you have, if it's an exterior, kind of more architectural project, then you may be fine with this type of view. A little more complicated is doing interior views. To do that, you usually create a camera here on the Visualize toolbar. And I'll show you how to do that. You just click on the Create Camera tool, and look at that. My cursor becomes a little camera. And you click once to place the camera, and this is known as the station point. Then you'll see here it looks like a little kind of projector TV screen. You should place this beyond whatever the last wall is that you want to see. Okay, and there's all sorts of things you can change. For example, the height of the camera. You can make it off the ground, which is pretty typical. 4 feet is probably a good idea. And then I'll just click exit. Now, what does this camera look like? Well, we can go here to the custom view, and there should be an option for camera number 1. And here's my interior space. And you can create additional elements in your project in any view, including this perspective view. I'm going to go to the 3D Tools toolbar, and there's a couple of different tools, and of course this is obviously a very complicated 3D modeler, but we just have a plan already created, so we can use this press pull feature. I'll just click on that, and if you have, say, a rectangle in your drawing, you can click on it and then move your mouse up and down, and you see how it gives us a height indicator on the tooltip, and you can even type in a number to get an exact height. So you can pretty quickly generate your model just by push-pulling different elements, and you can even draw using some of our favorite drawing tools. For a rectangle, you'll see how now, because I'm in 3D, it says, oh, where do you want to draw that? And I can specify my rectangle to be up in space here, and then I can use my same tool, press pull, to create a little 3D kind of counter. Now, as before, our goal is not necessarily to create a fully realized 3D model, but you can pretty quickly get a 3D wireframe that you can hand render over. You know, there are things here which are missing. For example, the door. I can probably just draw that in perspective by hand, or I can create it here in using 3D elements from AutoCAD. Either one, but for a hand-drawn wireframe, this may be all you need. One thing that would be nice for interior views in particular, they tend to have a much wider field of view. They're somewhat distorted. So we can change the field of view. The trick is, let's go to the Visualize ribbon, and we need to open up a view where we can see both our perspective, camera, and the overview of the project. To do that, up on the upper right, there is a viewport configuration button. We can choose 2 vertical viewports, and these are model space viewports, and each viewport can be configured separately. So for example, I can choose to go back into parallel view in one of these and orbit the model around so that I can see it. But the whole point of this was to be able to select the camera, which is hard to grab otherwise. And now when I go to the Properties menu, I can control the field of view parameter. So 55 degrees or even 60 degrees is not uncommon for an interior view. And you can see here, if I deselect, that my viewport is much more amenable to showing the full interior. And I went back to a single viewport to see my interior again, my camera number 1, with my nice wide field of view. Now the last thing is to navigate in this space. You can use this navigation wheel here on the right of your screen. Just click on it, and it's kind of like a steering wheel with zooming, which we are all familiar with, panning, which we are all familiar with, but a couple of other tools. Orbit, if you click and drag on that word, it spins your model around, which is kind of handy. Look does something similar. It keeps the camera at the same height, but allows you to just kind of turn your head, or turn the camera, I suppose. Up down does the same thing. The camera stays in the same position in terms of plan, but you can move it up or down depending on the look that you want. Walk, clicking and dragging on that moves you forward. Clicking and dragging down moves you backward. And then centering kind of centers it on the screen, although it often puts us kind of down on the ground, which we don't necessarily like. And then rewind allows you to go backwards in time to where you were previously. And you just click the little X to close the steering wheel. So how do you get yourself a drawing that you could print out or photo manipulate using the computer? Well, just go to Print, Control P. And as we have done before, you're going to want to choose a PDF file. AutoCAD PDF is the best one. However, we are going to want to print something other than model space 100% because what you get will be quite different. For example, if I just go with what is displayed, I'll click Preview. You should always click Preview. It shows kind of more of the model than I was hoping because it's the entire kind of viewport based on the camera position. So, whoops, I didn't mean to print that. Let's go to Print again, and again choose the right printer. But in this case, you probably want to choose Window. And what that allows you to do, it says, what do you want to print? And you can click and drag a window around the area that you're going to print. And now you'll see it should be a little bit more cropped. And then run through and complete the printing operation, and it will save it onto your computer. And that's really all you need to do to get yourself a drawing that you can hand render over, or you could use Photoshop to create a nice, interesting hand rendering.